Hi, I'm Menaka Raman-Wilms, and you're listening to the Decibel from the Globe and Mail.
Because I somehow felt that I didn't have the right baby, and I told a nurse that. I said that I don't think that's my baby.
That's Ruth Lush. She's now 73, and she lives in Triton, a small town in Newfoundland. And for years, Ruth had this fear that someone had made a terrible mistake.
And then I said, I can't tell myself, well, you're crazy, this is nuts, what are you going on with, you know? What is going through your mind? But yet that would keep coming back to haunt me. And that's exactly what...
Freelance journalist Lindsay Jones has been looking into what happened to two babies in 1969 at a tiny Newfoundland hospital. This is the Decibel. Lindsay, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So earlier this year, you were in Triton in Newfoundland. Can you just describe what that place is like, Lindsay?
Triton is in central Newfoundland. And so to get there, you drive on a causeway onto an island and then another island.
Driving along a little windy road right along the water, right along the ocean here. Wow, what a beautiful little place. Lots of crab pots and nets and buoys all hanging around those properties.
And Triton is right on the ocean. It's a beautiful little town with several different coves, and there's lots of snow crab fishing there. It juts out into the middle of the Atlantic, and it's right on the route of Iceberg Alley, where the icebergs break off and float down from Greenland every spring.
Oh, wow. There's an iceberg. It says Iceberg Alley. Holy crap. I've never seen one like that.
And when you were in Triton there, you spoke with a woman named Ruth Lush. Tell me about Ruth.
So Ruth is from Triton. She grew up there and she married a local man named Wilfred Lush. And she's very warm and chatty, maternal lady who is a pillar of her community. So Ruth loves making things for other people. She's a prolific quilter, and she loves taking care of her special needs son, Jason. She's constantly taking him and his friends on recreation trips and caring for other people in the community.
And so September 24th, 1969, that was an important day in Ruth's life. What happened on that day?
So the day before September 24th, 1969, Ruth went to the Springdale Cottage Hospital. She was having contractions and she was ready to give birth to her third child.
Would it be okay to take me back to 1969? Do you remember that?
I do remember clearly. I went to hospital. Well, back then you didn't know if it was a boy or girl, so it was a little bit really exciting, you know. Wonder what I'm going to get now. And my baby was born.
Ruth was excited. She didn't know if she was having a boy or a girl. And as Ruth tells it, she gave birth to a baby girl early in the morning. And she named her Dora Arlene Lush. And a nurse brought her baby back to her, as they did at the time. They brought babies to the mothers every few hours. And Ruth looked down at the baby and she thought, this is not the same baby that I had in my arms earlier.
I somehow felt that I didn't have the right baby, and I told a nurse that. I said that I don't think that's my baby. Oh, yes, that is your baby, you know. It changes overnight. Their hair color changes and everything. It looks a lot different, you know.
She told me that the baby didn't even smell like her baby.
Well, there was something about it. There was some reason I did not have that, I don't know what you would call it, the motherly instinct thing or that sort of...
The babies were both blonde. They were both about the same size. There was only 1 ounce difference between the two babies, as I discovered through comparing the two birth records. And the babies both had blue eyes. So she just knew that this was a different baby.
And so what happened then?
So Ruth looked down at the baby and she said, well, I guess you're right. I mean, nurses and doctors they still have a lot of authority, and Ruth took her word for it. She was older and in an authoritative position. And Ruth said, okay, I guess it is my baby. But that there was a gut feeling in her, this maternal instinct that she felt that she just couldn't let go of, that her baby was somewhere else. And it would come up again and again. And she never forgot it. She never let it go. And so before she goes to bed every night, she prayed for all of her children.
I would just lie in the bed, and I would name out my children. God protect them, keep them safe.
Yeah.
And then I'd say, should I have another daughter? God, you knows I don't. Protect her, watch over her.
But about 10 years ago, she was in a Costco and she was looking around at a woman who was talking to her youngest daughter. And she thought, I wonder if that's my baby. And she kept looking at her and like turning back and staring. And then she said to herself, no, I'm just being crazy.
Yeah. Did she have were there any clues or anything, I guess, to back up Ruth's ideas there?
Her daughter, Arlene, as a young child, blended in with the other children. As she got a little bit older, there were differences. Arlene is quite tall compared to everyone in the Lush family. Arlene was the only redhead, but that wasn't that odd because there were other extended family members that had red hair. Arlene's personality was a little bit different as she got older. She was more stubborn than the other children. Arlene would describe herself as a bit of a rebel when she became a teenager.
I guess I think, often if people have questions like this, a paternity test or a DNA test of some sort can often resolve these questions. Was a paternity test ever taken?
So Ruth raised the idea of a paternity test when Arlene was about 11 years old. And when she raised that to Arlene and Wilfred, it caused a stir. People were upset, and Ruth just decided to drop it. But then in January of this year, something unexpected happened. Ruth's eldest daughter had done an Ancestry.com test some years ago. So that was out there in the ether already. And so this woman named Caroline Weir Green, and she lives in Yellowknife. And she had gotten an Ancestry.com kit for Christmas from her husband. And her siblings, her elder siblings, had always said to her, you're so different from the rest of us. Maybe dad isn't really your dad. And, she didn't really want to go there until after her father passed away. But it had been several years since he passed away, and her husband wanted to get her something for Christmas. And so here she is finally with these Ancestry.com results popping up in her inbox while she's at work one day. And so she clicks on it and she sees that she has no relatives from the community where she grew up. And the surname of the people that are showing up as her biological relatives are from the Triton area. So she sees on the Ancestry.com results that she has a full sister living in Halifax. And so she contacts that sister and they make the connection that this is likely the missing daughter. So as Tina tells it, the youngest sister in the Lush family, they called their parents, Ruth and Wilfred, and they said, we found her. And Ruth was just shocked. She started shaking. She wanted to know, if her baby had lived a good life. And from there, just no one's life has ever been the same since.
We'll be back in a minute. So, wow. So, after all those years, more than 50 years, Ruth learned that she was right and that the baby she was handed in 1969 was not the daughter that she gave birth to. And Caroline, so this is Ruth's biological daughter then. What's Caroline like?
So Caroline she's warm and she's chatty. She makes everybody feel at ease. She's always doing nice things for other people. I mean, it is very obvious to me the two are related in that regard. She looks like her dad, in my opinion, though other people have picked up on, similarities between she and Ruth.
Yeah, it's funny how you describe Caroline is actually very similar to how you describe Ruth there, Lindsay. So that speaks to it as well. And what was Caroline's childhood like?
So Caroline grew up, she was raised by an aunt, so not the mother that gave birth at the hospital on the same day. So her aunt, Toots Budgel, raised her. The mother that gave birth in the Springdale Cottage Hospital wasn't taking care of the kids in a way that some of the neighbors expected. And a neighbor contacted Toots while she was living outside Newfoundland and asked her to come home. And so she moved home and eventually adopted Caroline and 4 other siblings. So Caroline was raised in a community an hour and a half away called Beachside. Like there was no way that they could have crossed paths very often, although Caroline worked at a restaurant in the town of Springdale as a teenager, and all she can think about is, did I serve my parents? Did I serve my siblings at some point?
Wow.
And no one knew.
Do you have a sense of how Caroline felt when she was growing up? Like, did she feel like she fit in with her family there?
Caroline always felt like she fit in, for sure. She loved her mom and dad, and she loved her life, and she was very loved by her parents.
So Ruth's biological daughter was Caroline. Arlene, though, is the other daughter in this story. Who was Arlene's biological mother then?
So Arlene's biological mother is a woman named Jessie Rousel. And so she gave birth at the Cottage Hospital. She was 31 years old. Jessie was a free-spirited woman, and she is no longer, unfortunately, with us. So Arlene didn't have the chance to meet her.
Wow. And do we know what might have happened there at that Cottage Hospital that led to these babies being switched?
Well, at the time, babies didn't room in with the mothers. The mothers recuperated in a ward separate from where the babies resided, in a nursery down the hall. And so a rotating crew of nurses and nurses' aides tended to the babies in the nursery and brought them to the mothers. So when a baby was born, what was supposed to happen, according to nurses that I interviewed who worked at the hospital at the time, was the babies were supposed to have an identity bracelet put on their ankle at the time of birth. Then they were cleaned and weighed down the hall in the nursery. So sometimes I heard bracelets can slip off, or perhaps bracelets don't get put on. No one's suggesting that happened, but there were also bracelets in the nursery in case a bracelet slipped off or in case a baby needed another one put on. So, there's a little bit of a footprint there of potentially, of how things worked at the time.
This is, I guess the big question here, Lindsay, is like, how could this have happened? How did it happen that these two babies were switched like this?
Well, that's the question everybody's asking. And that's part of the reason the families came forward to me to tell their story, because they want some answers. They want to know how this could happen. They want to know why it happened. I reached out to government, to the health minister, and asked if he would be open to doing a formal review. He said that he would look into it. I haven't heard an update about that. So, we're pushing in that direction.
We've talked about a cottage hospital in this story before, Lindsay, which is actually a term that I don't think a lot of people are actually familiar with these days. Can you just explain what a cottage hospital is and what this industry was?
Sure. So the cottage hospitals were provincially run healthcare centers. strategically placed throughout Newfoundland, and they were in central locations so they could serve multiple different small fishing communities at once. And so, one particular cottage hospital, like this Springdale Cottage Hospital, could have serviced more than a dozen different communities. People would travel there to see a doctor. A lot of times it was the first time people in Oakport, Newfoundland were able to see a doctor or a nurse was through the cottage hospital system.
I guess I wonder, is this kind of mix-up common, or like have you heard about this happening anywhere else?
So when people in the community started to hear about this case, other people came forward with their own stories of temporary mix-ups. So other women in the community told Ruth stories about being handed the wrong baby and, I had a boy, but you gave me a girl, or vice versa. Wow. And it was discovered early, before any sort of grave switch could happen. So based on hearing those stories in the community, it certainly does make you wonder if there are more out there that we just don't know about. But it has happened in Canada before. In 2015, there were 2 cases, 2 different switches involving, 4 men altogether at a hospital in Manitoba. The hospital was run by the federal government, and Health Canada did a formal review of what happened and how it happened. And they also offered undisclosed settlements to the men affected in those cases. And nothing like that has been done in Newfoundland. That is what the families are pushing for. And, we'll just have to see how the government responds when the story comes out.
Yeah. I mean, this is quite a story. And I can't even begin to imagine how emotional this is for everyone involved. I guess I wonder, you've been able to talk to these women. How is everyone coping with finding out this truth?
Well, it's been really tough on everyone involved. Ruth and Wilfred just want to spend as much time as possible with Caroline and get to know her. They've been cheated of the chance to raise and get to know their biological daughter. Caroline and her new siblings get along great. She and Tina, especially, are like best friends now. And Tina has wondered, what did I miss out on? I missed out on, potentially having a best friend as a sister. Ruth has said to Arlene, you will always be my daughter, and I will, always love you unconditionally.
Nothing's changed in regard to Arlene. I said, Arlene will always be my daughter unless she decides that for me to back off and she decides that I can't be there no more. Yeah. But it won't be on my side. I assure you that.
Arlene is struggling with, who she belongs to now. There are no new parents to meet. She found out that her parents are not her biological parents, and she's looking forward to getting to know these new siblings. And she hasn't met Caroline yet, but she's looking forward to meeting her. But it's all weighing on her. It's a lot of the feelings going through her head and everyone else's head is, what if this hadn't have happened? And no one really has an answer to that.
This is a pretty incredible story, Lindsay. Thank you so much for taking the time to go through it with us.
Thank you.
That's it for today. I'm Menaka Raman-Wilms. Our producers are Madeline White, Cheryl Sutherland, and Rachel Levy-McLaughlin. David Crosby edits the show. Kasia Mihailovich is our senior producer, and Angela Pacenza is our executive editor. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.